Hey YouTube, welcome back to Jeffco Builds. I know it's been a while since I recorded anything, and so I'm checking in, letting you guys know what's going on, what we've been up to, and just giving a general update. This video is going to highlight a 2,000-mile trip that we took. It's also going to highlight the pros, cons, miscellaneous things that happened to us along the way with our LMTV, and just kind of give you guys an idea of what you might expect when traveling in yours. If you're not building an LMTV, a lot of these things will still apply to your overland build, whether that be a van, a truck, a military truck, anything like that. So go ahead and stay tuned, check it out, a lot of good information coming your way. Alright, so let's dive right into this. I started off in Colorado. I drove 2,000 miles, 1,000 miles each way with my family of four, my wife and my two girls. We went through Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, and of course my home state of Colorado. So we hit 4 different states. We went through 2 national parks. We went through, I actually don't know how many national forests, but a lot of them. And saw a lot of beautiful country. We only did 30 miles of interstate travel. The rest was 2-lane highway and dirt road. So that was an achievement. That was honestly one of my biggest goals, was to not touch any interstate, but there was a spot in Bozeman where we had to jog to head north again. So somewhat unavoidable. Now, along with that, we stopped at Yellowstone. We also stopped at Glacier National Park, which are both beautiful places, and I'll go ahead and throw a tag in of Old Faithful. Let's do that. So here's Old Faithful for you. We also traveled through a lot of areas that I've never been. So one spot being primarily northern Montana. Never been there, never seen it. I've traveled a lot with work, picking up heavy equipment across the country and bringing it home and things like that. But on this specific trip, we went way more north than I've ever been. And we made it to a spot that was on McDonald Pass. That was very cool to me. I'd like to pass it on to you. And if you're ever going over McDonald Pass in Montana, I strongly recommend you stop because they have water. And it's a spring that just pours right out of the mountainside. They built a nice little monument for it. I'll tag a picture here for it. And we went ahead and filled up all of our water tanks halfway through our trip there. And that was awesome. That was the only time we had to fill up. So that, I suppose that could bring me to my first point. Water storage. We have 64 gallons of fresh water. We have 10 gallons of drinking water, what I call it, which we have in our Pepsi kegs that are stainless steel and purified. So we've got a total of about, with the hot water tank, 6 gallons there. So let's call it around roughly 80 gallons. So we've got roughly 80 gallons of water. And I think that with showering, family of 4, we probably could have made the whole trip on that if we were conservative. So we could have done 8 days on 80 gallons, so about 10 gallons a day, just for a quick reference for those of you watching that are concerned about your water usage. That included showering. We did like parents one night, kids the next night, parents, kids, parents, kids. So we tried to keep it down to 2 people showering a day. We also did our own dishes. I used my hose to clean out the cassette toilet. I'm not about using like a little tablespoon of water to clean a cassette toilet. No, I'm gonna flush that bitch out. So that used up some water. We also had some truck trouble, and we used 17 gallons of water to get home. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So water storage is great. I would recommend for your build, if you can afford the space, try to shoot for 100 gallons. I think that would be a really good number to shoot for. And, you know, if I were to do it again, I'd probably shoot for 100 gallons. So that's one quick tip. So the next thing I want to talk about is the size of your build. To me, this was not a concern. I'm used to big trucks. I drive commercial trucks all the time. I like big stuff. So having a relatively large truck was no concern of mine. My truck, as it sits today, fully loaded with fuel, water, everything, it weighs in at 24,600 pounds with just me in it. So I figure once we pack, you know, food into the refrigerator and put family, you know, the family of 4 in the cab, I'm roughly 25,000 pounds. Now to me, that's an important number, because if you'll notice, most mountain passes, 26,000 GVW requires you to do slower speeds, and also puts you more in that commercial category. So I'm pretty happy with 25,000 pounds. I know it's heavier than some other people's builds. A lot of guys saying that they're around the 22,000 pound range. I'm a little heavier because I used really nice cabinetry that's, you know, solid 3/4 inch plywood. I didn't skimp on anything, and I used starboard, which is this right here, and it is extremely heavy. I can't believe they use it on boats, because you would think it would just sink a boat. It's too heavy. So that being said, my truck's heavy, so keep that in mind. What is a weight that works for you and your needs? For me, the one hang-up that we had was the fact that if you want to go into Glacier National Park, you are restricted to 21 feet long, 10 feet tall. That means that this truck is out. You know, we couldn't go all the way into Glacier. We could drive up through the park entrance. We could make it, you know, I don't know, 10 miles up the road. And then there's a big sign that says, hey, no more trucks allowed. So that was kind of a bummer. We did end up renting a car, and we were able to drive up into the park, which was really cool. But maybe next time I would adapt and try to make my truck a little bit smaller, especially maybe with the height profile, to make it more accommodating when it comes to national parks and tight spaces. So now I'd like to talk a little more about pros, cons, and some LMTV exclusive kind of things. I need to kind of roll through these because this video is going to be ridiculously long if I don't try to go quickly through them, and I'm known for gossiping and just going on and dragging a story on. So, starting off, I'm going to start with, let's start with the LMTV exclusive stuff. So, what I mean by this is I experienced some things that only an LMTV owner would more than likely experience. Those were, these trucks are all relatively old. They have super low mileage, most of them, but they're mostly old. So my truck's a 98, you know, over 20 years old now. And a lot of guys that have these, even the A1 series, you know, they're still only within the early 2000s. Unless you're buying a brand new BAE truck, you know, you're probably somewhere between the 95 and the 05 range. You know, there's about a decade there where these were really popular, and that seems to be like the popular date or age of all these vehicles. Now my truck, when I left, had 5,000 miles on it. Now it has 7,000 miles. So even though they have low mileage, the age definitely takes its toll on these trucks. I did a thorough inspection of the truck before we left. Everything checked out really good, you know. However, we did have problems. So some of the problems we had were, first off, we were coming through Yellowstone, and we made it all the way through Yellowstone. We're just coming back towards Jackson, Wyoming, and we got into like a monsoonal rainstorm. Like little cars were pulling off the road, and we just kept trucking. We got 3 huge windshield wipers, and they're just rocking, and everything was great, right? So hail starts, you know, it sounds like a Pepsi can, and things are just beating on you hard. It was pretty fun, actually, until my truck went into neutral driving down the road. So I'm in 7th gear, doing 55 miles an hour, and just cruising, and then boom, it goes into neutral, and it's revving up, and I'm, you know, kind of wondering what's going on. I go to my shift selector, and I'm trying to shift it up or down, won't shift. So I start coasting, you know, and I'm down to 20 miles an hour now with 45 cars behind me, and they're all pissed off. And so finally, it catches 5th gear. So I'm like, huh, that's really weird. So I keep driving in 5th gear until I find a good pull out. I pull out and shut the truck off, fire it back up, it clears the keypad, and now we've got all 7 gears again. So I'm like, okay, that must have been a fluke. Hop back on the highway, boom, does it again. This time we're stuck in 2nd gear. So now we're doing about 15, 20 miles an hour, and I'm way on the shoulder. I've got one tire in the dirt practically trying to let people pass me, and so we make it to the next pull off. Now I'm thinking, okay, we got a problem. So I do some internet research and find out that you can pull codes on your Allison transmission through your electronic keypad. So we did that by pressing the up and downshift buttons at the same time, and we get a D2155, something like that code. So I look up this code. Thankfully we had service, and it turns out to be a speed sensor. And there's a flag. Got it. So, the speed sensor, it says that there's a speed sensor that is malfunctioning. So I'm thinking, of course, well, it had to have to do something with the rain. So I crawl under the truck, and thankfully, because I packed tools, which I strongly suggest you do, always pack tools, pack at least the necessities. And one thing that I always keep in my arsenal is brake clean. So I took brake clean and I unplugged each plug. There's 3 speed sensors, I think. I unplugged them. I really hit them hard with brake clean, and there was corrosion in one of the speed sensors that bolted in the port, or went in the port closest to what I would consider the transfer case part of the transmission. So clean that out, and finally we're good to go again. Now that's an extremely condensed version of what happened. It took me about 2 hours to get all this done, but we got back on the road. So that's the first thing. Corrosion, wiring, things like that. Be really careful, because these trucks are older. They've been through a lot of weather and just sat a lot. So that was our first problem. And then along with that, the CTIS system. Okay, so the CTIS I love. I think it's awesome. It's one of the reasons why these trucks are so cool. We would get on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere off of a county road, you know, and we'd go up 15 miles of washboards to find a camp spot. Well, during those 15 miles of washboards, I would air down to make the ride softer, which in my case is sand mode, because I have the high pressure sensor in there, the 150 psi sensor in there. I'm running about 80 pounds highway pressure, which means my sand pressure is only, I forget what it is. Maybe one of you knows. It's somewhere around 35 or 40 psi, I think. So I tried to put it in sand mode. Well, because I didn't have the CTIS overspeed deleted on my CTIS controller, it would constantly pump my tires back up. So that's another thing to think about with an LMTV. With your CTIS, do you want that to limit your speed? No is the answer. So send it off. There's a guy on eBay. That's where I bought mine. Send it off to him maybe, or if somebody else knows how to do it, go ahead and get your CTIS speed limiting factors taken off. That way you can decide and be in control of your own air pressure. Another thing that we did, and this was kind of a big one, we're coming home, and we're about 200 miles from home. We're leaving Rock Springs, Wyoming, and coming into a beautiful place that I love called Irish Canyon. And I noticed shortly after Rock Springs, Wyoming, that I could smell coolant. and I thought it kind of weird. So my wife had told me that one of my daughters needed to use the bathroom, so we were going to pull over anyway, so that way they could hop in the back. And so we pull over, and there's coolant pouring out of my truck. And that's kind of scary when you're not home or close to home. But thankfully, I knew that we were camping shortly, so I figured, well, I'll just keep an eye on the temp, and I'll address it when we get there. And so that's what we did. We made it to our camp spot. I'll plug a picture here of our camp spot with the hood up and everything. And so once we get there, we pop the cab up, and I mean, coolant's everywhere, but it's also smoking. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And my wife is like, something's burning. And I'm thinking to myself, well, nothing should be burning. It's just coolant. You know, you smell coolant. And sure as shit, she was right. The voltage regulator had essentially caught fire. So thankfully, I did have a fire extinguisher. Another thing you need to have in your truck, fire extinguisher. No exceptions. Get one. So I had my fire extinguisher. I got it out. Thankfully, I didn't need to use it. We actually used a squirt bottle that we use for doing our kids' hair. We had a squirt bottle, so my wife gave me that squirt bottle, and I squirted down the voltage regulator and got the fire extinguished, essentially. It wasn't really, like, there was no flames, but it was like melting and just smoldering inside. It was disgusting. And brings me to another point. Battery shut off. I have a master switch shut off in my battery box, so I ran around, I opened up my battery box, I shut it off, so that way all the power was killed to the truck side of the vehicle. Highly recommend that too. Always have a battery shut off. Always have a way to kill all power to everything, so if you have an electrical problem, it doesn't just compound and start a literal fire. So I kill the battery power and figure out that the voltage regulator is smoked, which, you know, again, age, wear and tear. It's not necessarily worn out by any means, but it's been sitting for 20 years. So there's a lot of small things like this that you need to think about and be prepared to tackle, and make sure that you have the knowledge of your own truck and how these systems work to some extent, that you can address them when it comes. So what we did there was, I was only 150 miles from home at that time, so I disconnected the voltage regulator and I drove home with no alternator, essentially. So my backup plan, I did have a backup, was to run, I had a 24 volt NOCO charger with me, a 15 amp charger with me, and I have my generator mounted up high here. So my backup plan, if we were further away, would have been to hook up my charger and run my generator while we were driving down the road to charge my batteries while we were driving. And I would have done that had it been night, but in the daytime, a mechanical engine doesn't really require a lot of electronics, so it was no big deal. Which brings me to my next thought about an LMTV, is it is a pro to have a mechanical engine. You know, these cat engines, are they rude? Are they crude? Yes, but they'll still run even when stuff is broken. So that's one thing that I really do like about the LMTV, is you've got a really rough and rugged truck, and not all of them. Granted, I know some of you are running the 3126, which is a little more electronic than the 3116 that the rest of us have, but they're a good engine in my opinion, because they are very simple. There's not a lot going on. There's not a lot of, you know, electronics that you have to deal with. If you were in a brand new pickup truck and you had an alternator catch on fire, the odds of you leaving after that would be pretty slim, in my opinion. I don't think, you know, I'm not a technician of new vehicles, but the odds of you being able to drive away after that would be very slim. So that's definitely a pro. So then we finished driving home, and I ended up using 17 gallons of water, and I used water, that way I wouldn't be leaking coolant everywhere, and I had water because I'm in an RV, so water's readily available, and it turns out that my water pump has decided to give up on me, and there's like a weep hole on the back of it, and it's just percolating out of it pretty rapidly, honestly. So we made it 150 miles with 17 gallons of water, which is a lot of water, but it got us home. So we made it home, the truck never overheated, and everything worked out. So thankfully that all happened in the last, 200 mile period of our 2,000 mile trip. So the next thing that LMTV specific that I would like to touch on is traveling speed. So, as we all know, these trucks are slow, and a lot of you actually have geared them up. I myself have a set of 307s from an MRAP in my garage, and they're ready to be installed. I also have a locking differential for the rear that I want to put in, but I've been hesitant to do that because I don't know that gearing up is right for me. Some of the mountain passes that I climbed, the steepest pass that I climbed was Teton Pass out of Jackson Hole. That is a 10% grade, so that's steep, and we were able to pull it at 40 miles an hour. We were able to keep up with the flow of traffic and pull that pass. Coming downhill was a different story. I had to be in third gear coming down and be really conscientious of braking. But the speed of these trucks, the gearing of these trucks, I'm on the fence about it. I'd love to hear your comments on what you all think about gearing up. I'm from the mountains. I drive Eisenhower Pass, Gore Pass. There's lots of mountain passes. I live at 8,000 feet. So gearing is kind of important to me. I don't know that 307s is going to be right for me, but I'm considering doing that. And the biggest problem with factory gears is you're really limited to that 58 to 60 mile an hour range, and it puts a lot of stress on your engine. Now, I don't know if my water pump decided to start leaking because it's been at 2,800 RPM for days straight, or did it go out just because it was, dried up from Texas heat, in Fort Hood. I don't know. But that is another thing that, you need to think about when you're building an LMTV. Next is fuel economy. A lot of people have asked me, Jeff, what's your fuel economy? Well, here it is. It is between 6 and 6.5 miles per gallon. I don't think that's terrible. I mean, it's a big ass truck. I have semis that get similar fuel economy, but they weigh similar amounts when they're empty. So, I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's a lot of fuel, yes, but it's a big truck, you push it up the hill. Let me see how many gallons of fuel you're going to use, So 6.5 miles per gallon. So round trip, we went through about 330 gallons of diesel for 2,000 miles. So there you have that. Brake. So there's a few things that I really love about my truck and a few things that I would do different in my next build, which there will be a next build. It might be like a year or something, but one of these days I'm going to show you what I've got planned. And I'm going to build another one of these better, not on an LMTV chassis. So, anyway, things that I love about this truck. First off, it's awesome and it's bold. I saw 3 of them when I crossed the country, 2 of which were, 3 including mine, I guess you would say, 2 of which were non-civilian. They were military, and, we got big old waves. We had some, older gentleman who was doing traffic control salute us. It was really cool. So the trucks are just awesome in their entirety. You buy one of these trucks and they're cool. People attract to them. They make their own statement, so that's really awesome. This thing is awesome on washboards, going up dirt roads and everything. The potholes and washboards, it eats them up. Huge tires, low tire pressure equals a smooth ride. So I really like that. The CTIS, we talked about that a little bit before. I really love the CTIS. I wouldn't change it for a thing. I would definitely highly recommend that if you have an LMTV, get your highway pressure higher than 55. Get it up to that 80. Do that pressure switch mod. Look at Broke Overland. Chad did it, and that's where I got the idea from. Check out his video on how to do that. It's awesome. And higher pressure gives you more stability driving, better fuel economy, better power. Really, if you're going to be on the highway, you want to be at that higher pressure. Hands down, in my opinion. The next thing that I really like about this truck is how like we talked about before, it'll run with minimal technology. You know, you really don't need a lot to keep this thing running. So there's a lot of good parking lot fixes that you can do to keep going, keep on the road. You got to have a little bit of MacGyver in you to figure it out, but if you get it, you know, you can keep going, and you can band-aid stuff, and you can make it, which is important. Next thing is the habitat that I built. I love it. We had really no problems at all with the habitat. The biggest complaint that I have with my habitat is the fact that I cannot run my AC as much as I would like to. So, and that's my own fault. I, A, don't have enough storage to place more batteries, and B, don't have enough rooftop to place more solar panels. So that's kind of on me. My next build, I think I would do 1,000 amp hours of battery, and I would probably do 1,600 watts minimum of solar. So that's my 2 cents. If you're building one, maybe consider doing pretty big battery bank and solar, because the solar is awesome. It's so much fun to know that you're generating your own power. And when you do it yourself and you don't hire somebody else to do your solar system, you really get a better appreciation of what it's doing. So the fact that I wired this one really kind of shows me like how awesome the system truly is, and what's happening in there. And then if something happens, you know how to diagnose it a little better because you put it together. So you know what wire runs where and what gauge it is, and how things operate and function. So definitely big solar. We ran our generator more than I thought we would, which wasn't a lot. We used a gallon of gasoline through the whole thing, but we did run it when I ran the AC system because I wanted that load support. So the Magnum inverter gives you load support, which allows you to run at to use less battery and have your generator help your battery bank to sustain a high load. So battery bank, huge deal. The next thing would be like the solar charging versus DC to DC charging. So my truck has a DC to DC charger. I also have solar charger. One thing I did not realize is that when I'm driving down the road with my DC to DC charger on, which I use like the first 2 days, I want to say, is that it does not charge at near the speed that the solar charging does. So my DC to DC charger converts 24 volts into 12 volts at 30 amps, whereas my solar array does 150 volts at 70 amps max. It doesn't run 70 amps all the time, but maxes out at 70 amps. So when you have good sunshine, you can actually produce those higher amperages and charge at almost double the rate that the DC to DC charger would. So I got a lot more efficiency out of running the solar and just shutting the truck off, shutting my battery charger off on the truck and letting the solar do the job. So pretty much the last 5 days of our trip, or 6 days of our trip, we were running strictly on solar with about half an hour of generator use a night to supplement our air conditioner. So that was cool. Another thing that is great about this truck is it is great for my children. They have exceptional visibility. I got that Jeep seat in the front, so they ride right in the center. They see everything we see, which is really important for me, for my kids to share the same experience that I had. When we rented that car up in Glacier, they were sitting in the back seat of a Tahoe. You know, they didn't have the view that we had. So it's really cool to me that the LMTV provides that for children. You know, if you do it the way that I did it, you don't have to do it that way, but you know, the ability to have those jump seats in the center, or a Jeep seat, or whatever you choose, is really awesome for your kids. So that was cool. Also, I mean, the truck's pretty easy to drive. You just put it in drive and go. It's like driving a humongous minivan. It is top heavy, but you know, it comes with the terrain. Also, the water pressure was awesome. The accumulator is awesome that we put in here, so it's like having house pressure. I have an outdoor hose, which I highly recommend, which was awesome when I broke down and had to add water to the coolant system constantly. So rather than coming all the way inside and using the kitchen sink, I was able to use my outdoor faucet and fill up my cooling system with that. So that was awesome. So now, moving on, I will go into some of the things that I would probably do differently on the next round, and here they are. So 1, battery bank and solar. Make them bigger than you think. Whatever you think you need, I'd double it. Just go double whatever you think you need, and that'll probably do. Next thing, and this is going to be huge. I highly recommend that you run one brand of electronics. So I chose a Magnum inverter, and then I've got a lot of Victron accessories, Next time I would go pure Victron, and that's not brand loyalty by any means, but I feel like they really got it together when it comes to integrating different systems. So you could use one app to monitor everything, or have different systems talk to one another. I am not crazy about the Magnum inverter in the monitoring segment. However, it performs exceptional. Like, the generator load support is awesome. It doesn't get hot. I can read all the temperatures and everything, but I would really like to have that touchscreen by Victron and just be able to read everything and be able to control everything from one screen rather than like 4 or 5 multiple different units. So that was a thing that I screwed up on that I won't do again. The next thing is making sure that you have a system for leveling your truck. So I didn't put a lot of thought into this, which is fine. I got some wood blocks. I drive it up on wood blocks. That works. But with leveling comes other problems that you don't really think about when it's parked in the garage or in your driveway. One being your shower pan. So I'm a veteran tile installer. I know how to do a shower pan with my eyes closed. The shower pan that I installed in this truck has a 1/4 inch of pitch per foot, which is code standard for a shower pan. Well, I wouldn't do that again. I would aggressively pitch my shower pan or put multiple drains in, because if let's say you're 2 inches out of level over the course of 20 feet, your shower might drain to a corner that it doesn't have a drain in, especially when you do a linear drain like I did. So if you were doing a linear drain, I would either do one on each side in tandem with like a V in the middle, the peak in the middle, and have it slope 2 directions, or I would do like a 1/2 inch of pitch, or maybe even 3/4 inch of pitch, just to make sure that no matter what environment you're parked on, you're always going to slope downhill, and so your water always drains. Which wasn't a huge deal. There was one night where I didn't really pay attention, and I was like, it's level enough, let's just camp. And so we did, and then we took showers, and you're having to use your foot to kick the water into the drain. So that was one kind of crappy part. Another thing that I would do in the bathroom is the biggest cassette toilet that you can buy. Just whatever Thetford makes, that's huge, get it. Don't worry about looks, unless you're doing composting or a different function or a different type of toilet. But if you're going to go with a cassette, get the biggest one, because with a family of 4, 2 small girls, every other day pretty much I was having to empty the cassette. So that sucks. Like, I wish you could make that stretch out a little further and maybe get 3 or 4 days use. But depending on where you're at, whether you can, use public facilities or things like that will also make a difference. The next thing is my hot water heater, which I'm running a Kuma hot water heater. I love it. I highly recommend the Kuma. I think it is an amazing unit, primarily because you use your truck's engine heat to heat your water. Now, what I found with this is that it makes exceptionally hot water, about 200 degrees, and it lasts for a very long time because it's so hot. So when you've got 6 gallons of storage, you're like, man, that's not enough for a shower. Well, I'll tell you what, at 200 degrees it is, because you have to cut it with so much cold that all 4 of us showered one night, one after the other, and we had hot water for 4 people on 6 gallons because the water got so hot from the truck. Now, the flip side of that is be careful where you mount your hot water heater, because my hot water heater is mounted right under my butt, under this cushion, and it created a lot of excess heat. So where we were traveling, it's early August, and it was already hot outside. So we were adding additional heat into the cabin space, which is not good. That's not what you want when you're in a hot environment. So I would highly recommend that you isolate your hot water heater, styrofoam or some kind of insulation around the entire thing. I know that they're insulated, but the pipes running into it, at least on my application, because I have the Kuma, the pipes running into it from the engine cooling system get warm, and then they put off heat, and then before you know it, this whole bench under my butt is a hot box. So keep that in mind. All right, so now I guess I'll move on to a pass-through. If you're gonna have a pass-through in your truck, I got one right here. Bam! It's like really, really small, okay? My pass-through is about 24 inches by 24 inches, and that is acceptable. I can fit through it. I'm 200 pounds, 5'9", and I fit through it. I might be 5'8". I might be lying a little bit. But I fit through it. My kids fit through it like nothing. Now, if I could do it over again, we came through it a lot, at least a few times a day. It's too damn small, to say the least. Really think about how much space you need to get in and out of your camper, because a 24-inch square is not enough. So think about that. And then overall, the biggest thing that I would change about my truck, I think, is my center of gravity. So when I built this, of course, I didn't test drive it as I was building it. I got the main skeleton completed, and then I drove it from the shop where I did that portion back to my own house, and I put it in this tent, like a makeshift carport that I had to work on it because I didn't have any space indoors to fit it, and I built it out. I built the whole thing out in one hit, and then I pull it out of the garage, I go take it for a test drive, and it's just like being on an ocean liner. The thing sways like crazy. So I went ahead and I added some, what are they called? They're these big rubber springs. They're like added Timbrin shocks, I think is what they're called. So Timbrin springs. I added these Timbrin springs, which help a lot. It's this big rubber bump stop, essentially, that helps with body sway and additional weight, and that helped a ton. But when I do this the next time, I will be paying specific attention to center of gravity. If I could go back in time and redo this, I would not have bought a truck that had a box already on it. I would have started with a cabin chassis, and then I would have piled everything within that chassis level and lower that I possibly could. I would have custom-made tanks. I would custom make them myself. Everything out of aluminum or stainless, or whatever I had to do to make it work. I'd get me 100 gallons of fuel storage, 100 gallons of water storage, my black storage if I didn't have a cassette toilet, but everything heavy and sloshing at frame grade or below. So that is my biggest piece of advice to you, is keep track of your center of gravity, because it sucks when you're already limited to 55 miles an hour. You come up to a 45 mile an hour corner and you're only actually comfortable driving through that corner at 40, So that was a big, it's not necessarily a disappointment because it's already a big, slow truck, but next time I would put more thought into it. I would just think about it further. So something else that I think you guys could think about. So other than that, that really concludes this video. I'll plug in some more photos here of the trip for you guys to check out since you made it through all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. And, overall we had a great time. The truck did great, aside from those few hiccups, but it's an old truck like we talked about, and things are bound to happen. So be prepared, and, just make sure that you're ready to tackle whatever comes your way, because you're going to have problems. Especially if you're driving a Stewart and Stevenson. It seems more videos I watch, the more people I see, everybody has some problems with these trucks. So make a list, know exactly what the known problems are, how to address them, and maybe buy the parts in advance. I just ordered a new voltage regulator, and rather than ordering one, I ordered two, because I just want to make sure that I have one in the glove box in case I have one burned down in the middle of the road again. So keep track of that. Thanks for watching. Appreciate y'all. And until next time, I'm Jeffco, signing off.